Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Dr. Paul is traveling for a few days this week, so we'll be doing a couple solo shows, but it's an opportunity for me to get some of the people that I really admire to join me and to bring you some good perspectives, some new perspectives on things that are in the news. And today I'm so thrilled to have an old friend, someone whose work I admire so much, and I read him religiously, and that's Jim Bovard. Jim, are you there with us?
Yeah, Daniel, thanks for having me on. I have to say I'm somewhat disappointed that you're not wearing a white shirt today, white shirt and tie, but that's okay. I'm not going to hold it against you.
Well, the boss is away, so the mice will play.
Hey, same here.
So, Jim, you've written a couple of great pieces on the whole Nunes memo, the House Intel Committee memo, the whole FISA thing. What I loved about what you did is that you took a whole different turn, because the partisan bickering was, oh my gosh, you Republicans are releasing classified info. The Republicans are, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, the FISA is being abused. You're trying to bring down the president. You bring a whole different perspective into it. And so I thought, it would be great to talk about that today. But I think I'd like to start with a quote that I think probably captures the root of the problem rather than how it's framed in the media. And this is by someone who I think we both have a certain amount of respect for. I think he's a decent guy. He's probably one of the best guys in the media, and I think he gets it in a lot of ways, and his takedown of Max Boot was absolutely one for the ages. And I'm talking about Tucker Carlson. As I say, a guy who, for the most part we admire. But here's a quote that he had that was tweeted from his show yesterday that kind of, I think, encapsulates the problem. He said, quote, "For the first time in generations, Americans have reason to believe that our intelligence and law enforcement agencies gravely misuse the powers we have given them." First time in generations. Jim, something tells me that you got a problem with that quote.
Well, it certainly made me smile. I mean, it's interesting. Tucker Carlson has done a lot of excellent work. He has some very good riffs on the FBI late last year when some of the scandal stuff was coming to the fore. But as far as the first time in generations, I guess if you don't count the Iraq War, the 2003 Iraq War that the intel agencies helped lie us into, they were very servile to Vice President Dick Cheney. My impression was that Cheney told them what they were going to find, and then they said, yes, sir. And there's a lot of other scandals going back decades on this. It's fascinating to see how a lot of people have been indignant at any criticism of the FBI or the CIA or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, because all three of these have a profoundly tainted record.
They do indeed. And, I think maybe we'll throw out another quote because I think it captures what you just said. The left's reaction, unfortunately, I don't want to lump everyone into it. When I say the left, I just mean in general. But Rob Reiner, the great intellectual filmmaker on the left, he said, "When you libel James Clapper and John Brennan, you libel America." It's sort of a weird, perverse John Wayne, I think someone said.
Yes, there was. I've seen some very good quips on that, but the basic question I have is, how is it possible to libel Clapper and Brennan with the number of lies that they told? I mean, if you go back 4 or 5 years, you got Brennan, who was head of CIA, authorizing the CIA to spy on the U.S. Senate when the U.S. Senate was getting ready to blow the whistle on CIA torture. You have Clapper out there telling so many lies. I mean, he's someone who lied about the surveillance of FISA court approved, which I think the statute of limitation for that perjury charge is getting ready to expire next month, which he'll probably have a celebration maybe. It might be he gets invited on MSNBC to celebrate with Rachel Maddow. I don't know. But a part of what fascinates me is looking at the history of this FISA court is they have approved so much illegal surveillance. And the whole idea that you have a secret court which secretly authorizes the wiretapping of a presidential campaign, this is something which should have been such an outrage, but instead people are quibbling, well, what did the FBI say in the memo? Did it have this, or was that in the footnote, or was it, was it clear? I would be interested to see the transcript of the FISA court hearing that authorized wiretapping a presidential campaign, because these FISA judges have tended to be as servile as a day is long. It's a secret court, so they think that their kowtowing is not going to be exposed, but it should be. I mean, Americans deserve to know what the FBI told them, and even more importantly, we know Americans deserve to know what the FISA judges themselves said before they signed off on this surveillance warrant, which might have been what those two FBI agents who were having the affair, what they talked about having an insurance policy. Maybe this was it.
So we really just saw the tip of the iceberg. But you've written in these pieces, and you've written before about the creation of the FISA court system, the history of it. Unfortunately, we have a tendency of believing that, we wake up to, a new world every day, and that's not necessarily the case. Can you take us back to when FISA was created? What was the purpose of it? What was it trying to address? What was happening in our country at the time that made them say, we need a new system? Was it to reform? Take us back to FISA's creation, if you can, Jim.
Yeah, FISA was created in 1978. It was in response to the illegal wiretapping done by Nixon. The Supreme Court ruled in 1972 that the president did not have authority on his own to order wiretaps. This was one of those Supreme Court decisions that vanished after George W. Bush became president, and Bush did that on his own authority. But there were the investigations by the Church Committee, which showed that the FBI and CIA had done a vast amount of illegal surveillance of the American people. And so this FISA court was created as a way to avoid letting presidents and intelligence agencies choose who they're going to wiretap. There was a different standard set for this court to authorize a wiretap because it was targeted to foreign agents. So as I understand it, the court would have to find probable cause that someone is a foreign agent. And the reason that's a different standard is because the Fourth Amendment of the Bill of Rights prohibits warrantless, unreasonable searches of Americans. And that was what had been happening before the FISA court, and Congress and President Carter sought to prevent that from occurring again.
So really it was an attempt at reform of a system gone haywire that created the opportunity for the system to go even more haywire, it sounds like. It almost reminds me of the War Powers Resolution. It was designed to prevent presidents from taking us into war on their own, and it turns around and it actually authorizes presidents to take us into war on their own without a congressional declaration. But all this aside, its strange birth aside, the typical Washington thing aside, how well did it work? Did it work well in the beginning, or will we see abuses from the very beginning of the FISA?
There were probably a fair number of abuses early on. We don't really know that much. I mean, it's a secret court, which with secret hearings, and we almost never see the transcripts of those cases. Things got a whole lot worse after 9/11 because George W. Bush, there was a quote that Jack Goldsmith, who was one of the top people in the Justice Department, Goldsmith said that David Addington, who was the top aide to Dick Cheney, David Addington said that the U.S. is only one bomb away from getting rid of that obnoxious court, the FISA court, because they wanted to reestablish that the president on his own authority had the right to order wiretaps of Americans. And that was not the law of the land. George W. did it anyhow after 9/11. The changes in the Patriot Act, which Ron Paul was one of only 3 Republicans to oppose, the changes in the Patriot Act made it much easier to do surveillance that wasn't really authorized under FISA. But what was much worse was the FISA judges rolled over for some of the Bush administration interpretations of the law and the Fourth Amendment that turned the federal surveillance into a dragnet against Americans. And then 4 years later, you got the New York Times blowing the whistle on how the NSA was wiretapping up to 500 people here in the U.S. without a warrant at a time and surveilling millions of Americans' emails. And then people were saying, well, where's the FISA court? There was, at that point, it should have been obvious the FISA court was utterly unreliable as far as safeguarding Americans' rights and liberties.
And don't they have a pretty good record of approving the requests for?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, what happened, I mentioned the New York Times thing. A few months later, the USA Today exposed that the NSA was, sweeping up millions of Americans' phone records, calling records each day. And there was a big backlash after that USA Today piece. So what the Bush people did, the Bush Justice Department, those folks went to the FISA court and said, hey, we have a new interpretation of the Patriot Act. There is a clause in the Patriot Act which authorizes the FBI to ask for any records that are tied to a terrorism investigation. So the wizards in the Bush Justice Department decided that the telephone records of all Americans were tied to a terrorism investigation, basically treating all Americans like terror suspects. What did the FISA court say? Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And it's like, for the love of goodness, if you can't stand up and say no there, then it's not really a court. It's just, I had a piece in the Hill yesterday where I said that the FISA court has a long record of heaving buckets of judicial hogwash to cover up the ravaging of Americans' privacy. And that's what they did in that decision with the roundup under the Patriot Act of all of our phone records. They have done that in other decisions. And it's interesting, this is a secret court. There have been a lot of Supreme Court decisions that define the Fourth Amendment. And some of them are bad, some of them are pretty good. But what the FISA court did was act as if the Fourth Amendment didn't really exist, and it also chose to ignore a lot of the Supreme Court decisions, which would have strictly limited the things FISA court approved.
And this culminated, then you talk about, the Bush people went back to FISA to make legal the illegal things they've been doing. Is this where we got the so-called Protect America Act, which we also refer to as the FISA amendments? Is that this codified that into law? Or, I mean, isn't that a great title, Jim? The Protect America. Can you imagine being a member of Congress and voting on a bill, Protect America Act, and vote no? It's something out of the Soviets, I think. But anyway, is this what happened? Is this how it was codified?
Yeah, that was part of it. But keep in mind, the Protect America Act, a wonderful wrinkle on that almost nobody recalls, is that the Bush administration set out a rumor that there might be a terrorist attack on Capitol Hill shortly before Congress voted for that. That was something that Jane Harman actually blew the whistle on and said that the Bush administration had issued that warning, knowing it was full of crap. But that was part of how they stampeded that thing. And the details of that Protect America Act, it basically allowed the government to surveil any American who exchanged phone calls or emails with anybody abroad. So it did not even make a pretense of targeting terrorist suspects. Instead, it's like, okay, somebody was talking to Germany, so boom, let's take their calls. This is something that's. It was an embarrassment that Congress passed it. It's the kindest word I could say. I mean, there was someone had a great line many years ago that if the Fourth Amendment was if somebody proposed that in a bill to Congress, it probably not even get out of the House committees. There's so much contempt. I mean, and this I'm sure Ron Paul spoke against this, but he didn't have much support on his side of the aisle or on the other side of the aisle. Well, Congress has done a horrible job on privacy.
Yeah, well, he doesn't want to protect America. But actually, Dr. Paul wrote about it in his column this week, and I'm sure you've thought about this whole idea too. One of the things that really irked him and irked me, and I'm sure it irked you, is that Devin Nunes for the Republicans, even President Trump is calling him a hero and a great hero for releasing this. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but the fact of the matter is he was the number one person pushing the extension of the FISA amendments, preventing it from sunsetting, keeping it intact, even as he was sitting on this information of how it was being abused, not only for us lowly citizens, but even for a presidential candidate was falling into the dragnet and being abused. So, that seems pretty dastardly, doesn't it, Jim?
Well, it's a paradox. No, it's. I mean, this is It's shady. It's shady, and it's appalling that that sequence would have happened. Justin Amash and others were out there. Ron Wyden, people like that were raising hell, but Congress got rolled as usual.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's just folks should be skeptical of almost all the players on Capitol Hill in this current controversy. There are a handful who are pushing for for almost a full disclosure of everything in this case, and those have got good credit, but. I want to see the damn transcript of that FISA court hearing on this search warrant of a presidential campaign.
Yeah, release the transcripts. Forget about the memos.
That's a hell of a lot more important because it goes to the heart of how this court operates.
Yeah.
And there was a hearing, there was a transcript that got released from them about 15, 16 years ago, which the court was talking about the proposal by the Bush administration to expand surveillance, and there was the Secrecy News got the transcript, analyzed it, and said that it was amazing how servile that the judges sounded, and they were so servile that they even asked Justice Department officials on how they should handle criticism of themselves. And this is a court. This is an independent court. This is a joke.
That's what happens when you have secret courts paid by the state.
Yeah.
I guess we'll probably need to close this down, Jim, but you have a great quote in your Hill piece that I'm going to throw back at you because I know you'll have a witty quip in response. But here's our great James Comey, the great person that we're told by the Rob Reiners of the world we dare not say anything against. Here's what he had to say about releasing the Nunes memo, which for all its shortcomings, we're happy to see it. He says, quote, releasing this memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with the intelligence community, damaged relationship with the FISA court. It's the end of the world. What is your take on Comey's panic attack?
It's always fun to see his piety piffle on Twitter. He's as sanctimonious as the day is long. But something which I want to know is during the time Comey was FBI chief, how many times did FBI agents mislead or lie to the FISA court? Because the FISA court came out with a decision last year, which they had 10 pages, a list of 10 pages of complaints about how the FBI had misused the law or misused the information FISA authorized them to get. How many falsehoods did FBI agents tell to the FISA court when Comey was boss? Because this is something that goes to the heart of Comey's credibility, and the entire FISA court process.
That's a very good point. Comey, come clean.
Good luck on that one.
Yeah, well, we could probably talk for an hour about this, Jim. You're such a great resource, and I'm glad you're watching it and writing about it. I'm glad they're giving you a platform. I really want to thank you for joining us again on the Liberty Report, and look forward to having you back again soon.
Hey, thanks so much, Daniel. It was lots of fun to take some shots at these things with you.
And I want to thank our viewing audience today for tuning in to the Liberty Report, even with Dr. Paul gone and tolerating me as the lead anchor. I hope if you like the show, you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel and have your friends and your enemies subscribe so you have something to talk about. So thanks again for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and please come back and see us tomorrow.